Hi teachers, Brother Anderson here. So excited to present to you Thursday's lesson, which is a doctrinal mastery lesson from Matthew 16. We've returned by popular demand to the goal of engaging students with each of these lessons by giving you some recommendations. And this is so easy to do with these doctrinal mastery practice lessons. So let's dive in. Now, there are a couple of elements that are pretty consistent across these doctrinal mastery practice lessons that you may be skipping over by chance. And I've even heard some feedback from some of my teachers that maybe the students are even getting tired of these. But there is so much built-in variety in these that I would invite you to maybe take a look at them. So for instance, we've got the doctrinal mastery lesson here about the priesthood keys in Matthew 16, 15 through 19. And they give you this handout with all these keys on it. And you might think, I'm never going to use that. But, give it a chance here. I think it's actually could be just exactly what your students need. If you want to engage your students, engage them in this activity. You hand them each one of these key outline things. You have them give them some scissors and have them cut out all the keys is what it tells you to do. And then you're going to have them write down a phrase or a sentence on each one of these ones. And because it's quite a long doctrinal mastery reference, they're going to have several of these keys written out. And then you have them mix it up and then have them spend a couple of minutes. So it's going to take some time for them to write their lines, cut them out, mix them up, and then try to put them back together and give them just, a couple of attempts to do it and then make a game of it. Time them. Say, I've got a candy bar here for the person who can put it in the proper order the fastest. And then, have the students, once they're ready to do it, have them mix it all up and then start a timer and ready, set, go. And they put it in order. Boom. That's you could spend 10 minutes doing that. And that would go a long way to help them to memorize this reference, not even knowing they're memorizing it because they're just having a good time. And then according to this call-out box, encourage them to keep those, maybe have them put them in nice little stacks and you hold on to them because there will be a review activity in the future that may utilize them. All right, second thing. So another thing that some of my teachers are complaining about is the reviewing of the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge. The students are getting really tired of doing this. Well, I think you can make another game out of this. Now, if this 2 games in one day is too many, totally get it. You're going to have to make that decision for yourself. But one thing that they invite you to do is to invite a student to read aloud a sentence from one of the 3 things, paragraph 5 through 12, any one of the 3 things, and see if the class can correctly identify which principle of acquiring spiritual knowledge that one phrase is coming from. Now, you could do this in a variety of ways. There's only 3 possible answers, so they can do that. And you can start off with a warm-up and say, let's see how good you can tell which one we're talking about from each phrase. And then if I were you, I would actually maybe write those phrases down beforehand, have them in a jar, have a student pull it out, and see how good the students are at just from that one sentence, how good they are at knowing which principle it is. And if they're really good at it, tear it in half and give them only half of a phrase and see if they can do it that way. You can do this a bunch of different ways. You could have them do Pictionary with one phrase and see if the students can get it. You could have them do charades with one phrase and see if they know which principle it is. Again, it's about having variety and having a little bit of fun, but you're still just trying to get deep these 3 principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge. There's a way to do all these different things. Now, let's get on to the main event, which is the practice application. So the way that they have this set up is you've got a friend who sees on social media somebody criticizing the church. And you can totally do that, but I'm thinking that sometimes, especially if, we're into April and students are getting tired of every time you say a scenario and they're like, well, my brain shut off. I heard the key word that I don't like, and so my brain shut off. Well, do it a different way. You could invite the students and you could go up to a whiteboard and you can say, all right, I want you guys to name for me some of the criticisms that you have heard on social media or wherever that people have used to criticize the prophets of the church. And then just get some real ones that they've heard. Maybe it's something from the SEC's a fine that they gave the church, or how the church is got all this money and some of the criticism there. Could have been something from General Conference, whatever. Just let the students do it. And don't be afraid of whatever the criticism is. They're in the world. They're hearing these things. So, might as well get them out there. Now, what you're not going to do is necessarily answer the criticism, because that's not what this scenario is all about. This is about learning why God uses prophets and why he gives out priesthood keys. And so I actually really like how they've got this set up, and I think you could do some version of this. Let me give you a suggestion. You could totally do it the way they've done it, and it would be a great activity. But the way I've done it, or the way I kind of tweaked it a little bit is, first of all, I made text number 2 text number 1, because I think we get our eternal perspective by seeing divinely appointed sources. So I would, and I would probably actually have a group text, depending on the size of your class. And maybe you got a bunch of students who don't have cell phones. But if you do, and if you wanted to do something like this, or maybe you already have a class group text going, I think it'd be really cool if they actually did a text, not like a hypothetical text. And you can say, all right, so with these criticisms, let's imagine you have a friend who is really bothered by one of the criticisms you put on the board, and you want to send them a text message just to help them, you're doing the acquiring spiritual knowledge thing. So text number 1, before you send the text, I want you to look up a scripture, and I'm going to give you a couple of options, and then you can find one of your own if you want to, but I'm not going to give you a ton of time, so maybe use one of my suggestions. But we're going to look up a scripture that teaches us something about how God uses prophets and how he expects us to treat those prophets, those men that hold keys. And so these are doctrinal mastery verses from yesteryear, but Doctrine and Covenants section 1, verses 37, 38. Doctrine and Covenants section 21, verses 4 through 6. That one's my personal favorite. You've got Amos 3:7. And you've got Doctrine and Covenants section 107, and I can't remember exactly which ones are the Doctrine and Mastery verses. I didn't look it up. But boy, you've got lots of really good verses, 8 through 10, 18 through 19, 22, 27 through 29. Basically, any of those verses would be helpful. And then it even states here at the beginning of this lesson, you could even give them the handbook and say, if you want to go to the handbook and just see what it says in there. But whatever, the first text needs to be them, after they've looked up one of these scriptures, just typing up, according to this verse, this is why the Lord uses prophets, and this is how he expects us to treat them. Now, text number 2, since we've swapped these, now you're going to invite them to share in their text why this makes sense from an eternal perspective, why God would use prophets, and why he would expect us to treat them in this way from an eternal perspective. And just invite them to try to get out of the world and the current, situation we're in and look at things from a higher point of view. Then the third text here is an invitation to act in faith. But I'd say it this way. I'd say on your third text, I want you to share just a brief personal experience you've had with following priesthood keys. Whether that, was a calling or a personal invitation from the prophet that you followed, or maybe getting a patriarchal blessing, somewhere where you followed priesthood keys and it was a blessing to your life. But again, brief, it's a text message. Nobody wants a novel on a text, but then also a quick invitation to act in faith. And have them do those 3 things. And as the students text in your group text, you'll see the text starting to show up, and take them one at a time. I wouldn't do all 3 of them at once. I'd do one at a time. And hey, did we get everybody? Who said this text? That was a really, really good one. I guess because the name is on there. Tell us more about what you think about that. And it becomes this real easy way to then know who of your students you can call on and engage, and it'll be great. So this lesson's fun. I mean, just as I was looking at it, I'm a little jealous I don't get to teach it. Anyway, I hope it goes well for you, teachers.